Hello, I'm Thalia Kidder, Senior Advisor on Women's Economic Rights. Last year, with Felipe, Ipe, Ramiro, and many others, we planned and carried out a learning exercise and a global learning event in Azerbaijan. So first, I'm going to cover some of the learning points from that event. And then next, I'm going to talk about the progress we've made in our thinking and in tools on households and also on care work since last July in an initiative called Innovations in Care. The background to the learning event was that there had been a survey of WELL programs, and it showed that women do benefit from WELL and GEM programs, but women were also still struggling to lead enterprises because of the dynamics in households, including with men. So the question framing the whole 5 days was, how can we increase women's agency? If women don't have the power to negotiate successfully in their households and communities, their leadership in a market program just isn't sustainable. Most programs never ask what women's time and workload is about. We did a learning exercise in 6 communities around this aspect of women's negotiation with families, time and workload, although we're very clear that assets and tools and finance are also other areas for negotiation. In the workshop, participants discussed their own definitions of women's agency. These were some of the definitions: the capacity and ability to influence and control change, empowerment of women to be socially and economically active, an increase in women's confidence, and the capacity to know one's rights and demand and claim them. This slide is an example from Colombia of one of the visual outputs of the learning exercise. So in a focus group, women discussed the average number of hours they spend during a week on various types of work: unpaid agricultural work, community work, work in their enterprise, and unpaid work caring for family members and people in other homes. You can see here with 79.6 hours that there's no idle time. It was also very compelling and powerful to recognize how productive women are. So if women did, say, spend 10 more hours a week in the business, what would they not do? What would the trade-offs be for this family? That with this exercise, the tensions and trade-offs that women face came alive. In this exercise, the other thing that came alive was women's need to renegotiate. In this slide, women in Azerbaijan did 3 things. They showed what areas of work they most wanted to renegotiate, and then, being realistic, what they thought was most achievable and what would be least negotiable. So the point here is for a program and for a community to be realistic, to support women's agency on making changes that are achievable. Here are the 6 hypotheses of the group about women's agency. The first is that income does matter. Increasing women's income can be a catalyst in increasing women's agency. The second is attitudes and beliefs. Attitudes and beliefs about gender constrain women's agency in every single context. So it's not enough to work on increasing women's income alone. And recently, the project in Africa called Researching Women's Collective Action also found this, that women in collective action in Ethiopia and Mali and Tanzania did have significant increases in their income, but the increases in their decision-making power were very inconsistent. So having income did not necessarily mean that women were being able to challenge the attitudes and beliefs and have decision-making power in households. Third, care work. Care work constrains the time that women have to invest in an economic enterprise. Fourth, institutions and women's agency. Fifth, gender-based violence. The prevalence of gender-based violence in any particular context needs to be evaluated at the beginning of a project and then monitored. And last, the women's movement and women's agency. Our projects can be complementing a women's movement in country that will be working to enact and press for better implementation of policies and laws and practices that challenge or demystify patriarchal norms. So our projects can work with the women's movements in each country. There was much other learning in Azerbaijan. Participants commented on 2 points especially. One of them was about households in general. And participants said, I've learned that I need to pay more attention to households and household level dynamics, because what happens in households really does affect what women can do in markets and also who benefits from our markets-based programs. Secondly, participants said that the issue of care work was very compelling, and the care diamond, which I'll review in a minute. On these 2 points, what progress have we made since last July? First, on households, we've revised and expanded the household system analysis in the Gendered Enterprise and Markets Toolkit, which is step B. On care work, we've had a number of discussions since last July, both within Oxfam GB, Oxfam affiliates, the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, and other INGOs such as CARE and ActionAid. And what we have been looking at is how we can address care work more in development. What's a definition of care? Care means all that we do for the needs of other people with whom we have a personal relationship. We affirm the right of women and men to give and receive care. So we want to reduce the drudgery of inefficient household tasks and avoid the isolation of women and the lack of recognition of those who do care work, and to make the distribution of responsibility of care more equitable. And this all is a precondition for women's political and economic and social empowerment. This is the care diamond. The concept of the care diamond is how a society provides care. So the way that the provision of care is organized and divided across these 4 actors has important implications both for who give care and those who receive care, and it's called the social organization of care. The big question that most people have is, how could we possibly promote any change in how care is provided? Precisely because in most societies, the division of labor by gender in households on providing care has been one of the most difficult things to change over time, wherever you are. There's a framework called the 3 R's framework. So the theory is, if women's empowerment is blocked by too much time, too much work spent on care and household work, but we also want to have care for the well-being of our families and society, we need to recognize care work, both paid and unpaid. We want to reduce the inefficient and isolating and burdensome tasks of care in many communities. And we also want to redistribute care from women to men and from households and families to the state and to private employers and the market. How can we do this? How can we do this in Oxfam's program? The proposal has been that we are going to have a care analysis tool that's simple and easy to use for many different kinds of programs. Here it is. This tool is in progress. We're calling it for now a rapid care analysis tool. And what we have understood that its purpose is that we want to understand in each context the patterns of providing care and the housework for both men and women, and come up with inspiring and practical proposals to make some changes. We also want to make sure that this rapid care analysis tool can be used with many types of programs: rural, agricultural, urban, women's political participation, essential services, as well as business and markets. And another principle we've come up with is that this is very much about women's empowerment, yes, but we think that there will be more understanding and commitment and ownership to a process of analyzing care in communities if care is understood as a public good. We're conceiving of the rapid care analysis tool as having 4 steps. The first conversation would be about well-being and care to build the group's understanding and commitment to this issue. We've thought about having 2 questions at the beginning. Who do you care for and who cares for you? And looking at a few predetermined areas of care work that we think are fairly universal. We'd leave 2 or 3 categories of care open for the group to discuss. And we'd ask, what's essential? The second conversation in the rapid care analysis tool would get into who provides care here in this community. And then the other part of this conversation would be what infrastructure facilitates doing this work. So what do you need in terms of fuel or electricity or water piping? The third conversation in the care analysis tool would be about trying to come to agreement about what's problematic about the way that care is provided in this community. We've entitled this so far as too much or too little. So we want very simple questions. Which of these tasks take too much time or inefficient? What do we want more infrastructure and services for because we have too little time to spend with our children, or too little care for young children because there's no kindergarten or daycare? So that the community would come up with agreed problem statements about care and care provision in this particular context. And the fourth area is about what are the options for change. And we've considered having a visual matrix which says what changes could we make and what changes would make the most impact on people in the community and what would make very little impact. But then also on the other axis, what would require an enormous amount of effort or time to make that change, and what would be relatively simple. One example of the UNDP program in Burkina Faso that set up, I think, solar-powered community energy platforms, electricity for grain grinding mills and water pumping, which ended up having women have between 2 and 6 hours more each day in their particular family. And over time, they found that women had more income because they could be involved in more income-generating activities, that more girls were in school, and women were more involved in community decision-making and politics. So this is the idea we're developing for a rapid care analysis tool. Again, the objective is to have many different programs understand more about this relatively invisible dimension of family life, of women's lives, care work, and to take small practical steps for change as part of a larger program with other objectives. In March and April, a few programs, both urban and rural and development and humanitarian, are going to be piloting these steps. If your program is interested, please let us know. By June or July, we'll have an improved tool available, which will be integrated into the GEM toolkit as step B, as well as integrated into other types of methodologies, and we'll keep learning. For now, thank you, and I trust that the WELL community of practice in Asia will be as successful as ever, and I look forward to hearing what you've been learning about WELL and advocacy.